you're watching Headlines. I'm Anastasiya Lavrina. President of the United States of America, Donald Trump, fires up global debate in Davos. In his first international speech of his second term, Donald Trump appeared via live stream at the World Economic Forum in Switzerland. He delivered a fiery critique of European regulations and trade practices, vowing to impose tariffs on companies manufacturing outside the United States. But the president's agenda didn't stop there. Trump turned his attention to OPEC, demanding OPEC lower oil prices and the world drop interest rates. With the U.S. threatening 20% tariffs on European imports, the EU is scrambling to diversify its export markets. Tensions are rising as the world braces for the impact of Trump's bold economic policies. What could this mean for the EU and global trade relations? More on this right now. Joining me is Mehmet Ogutçu, the London Energy Club chairman and former Turkish diplomat, OECD executive. Professor Daniel Pomer, political expert, researcher at the university. And Taras Kuzio, professor, National University of Kiev, Mohila Academy. Dear experts, warm welcome to Headlines. Daniel, my first question to you, what are the most critical sectors in the European Union that are vulnerable to protectionist policies from the potential Trump's intention to have this new tariffs policy?
If I think of the automotive sector, which is already in deep crisis in Europe, I think of the Volkswagen crisis, as for Germany is concerned. If I think of Stellantis situation, the former Fiat, the Italian car, so the heavy regulations by the European Union on green transition put a burden on automotive sector. So the perspective of being cut loose of the US market could only worsen the overall manufacturing sector in Europe. Europe and the US are the largest trade partners in the world. So the trade of the US with the US doubles the size of the exchange trade with China. So for us, if I think of my own country, Italy, the US market is essential in many factors, in many aspects. So I think starting from the automotive sector, which is the leading manufacturing sector in the industrial economy of Europe today, I think that the perspective is quite black.
Right, it seems that there will be the serious implications if Donald Trump may decide finally to have this new tariffs policy. Mr. Ogutçu, United Kingdom is not a part of the European Union anymore, but still, Trade Secretary says that UK's globally oriented economy means it's also vulnerable. It's, of course, better positioned than China and the EU, but still there are some threats for that as well. Could you please explain us what does it mean?
Well, let me first tell you that what we are going to see under the second presidency of Trump will not be so much different from what we saw from 2017 to 2021. So he made it very clear that as part of his Making America Great Again, he wants to reduce trade deficits significantly. And in order to do that, I think there will be more and more protectionist measures and also a series of tariffs. He already did this with steel, aluminium, and automotive. I think in the new era, I have no doubt that there will be more frictions between US and the European countries. I'm not talking only EU, of course. The UK is also included in that. So he made very clear that in return for better treatment of European car exports to US and also other manufacturing and servicing industries, including digital and financial, and he will reduce the tariffs and also the protectionist measures. But I don't think this is going to happen. If you look at the tariffs, Today, US is applying 2.5% tariffs on European cars, whereas European tariffs are very heavy against the US products and services. Therefore, I'm not going to criticize Trump severely for putting in place these new trade measures, because Europe was a castle, very protective castle, protecting itself from the outside world, expecting everybody to have free trade, free tariffs, whereas itself is imposing it. So this is going to change clearly with Trump's policies. As for the UK, you ask, and thanks to Brexit now, UK has a free hand to negotiate a separate deal. This is what also Trump implements in his overall strategy. He doesn't like multilateral frameworks. He likes bilateral arrangements. That's the reason why, in his first term, Trump has dismantled transatlantic trade and investment partnership, which has no chance of being revived. And he wants to sign a free trade agreement with UK, so long as they can agree on this, of course. And therefore, I believe that there is going to be a more preferential and more favorable trade terms between US and UK, particularly on the financial services, digital services, pharmaceuticals, aircrafts, and including defense materials, and green energy. I think this is going to be one of the troubling troubles that the European Union trade will have, because EU has, as you know, green carbon tax and also all this transitional process in energy, increasing the cost. That's one of the reasons why EU will not be able to compete in the global league with the US and China, because there are so many hurdles for EU's own operators. So overall, I think UK and US will have a special relationship, like in the strategic political areas, in trade, energy, digitalization, and also other areas where US attach great importance. But here, and I don't know whether British will be happy about this or not, Trump will always have the upper hand. He will impose his will, and he has strong leverage and tools at hand for doing
Indeed,
so.
very interesting case what we can observe in relations between the United States of America and United Kingdom. Therefore, Mr. Kuzu, what's your attitude to the situation, the stance of the United Kingdom and other European countries? Do you think that there will be priority given to the bilateral cooperation with the United States rather than the mutual approach to the new global situation?
Well, I think there are two. I mean, I'm not an expert on tariffs and these kinds of things. I'll leave it to my two colleagues to deal with that more specifically. But there are two areas where Trump has had in the past, in his first presidency and today, as having two positive effects. Firstly, on military spending. In 2014, when Russia first invaded Ukraine, only 5 out of then 28 NATO members spent 2% of GDP. Today, it's 24 members out of 32. So Trump, very undiplomatically, of course, who complained about very low European defense spending, has pressured and lobbied Europeans, together with Russian potential threat, has forced Europeans to increase their defense spending, which is, I think, a positive thing. Secondly, energy. Again, Europeans have been very hypocritical here. They have reduced their reliance on Russian energy since 2022, when Russia launched its second big invasion of Ukraine. But nevertheless, quite a few key European countries, such as, for example, the Netherlands, which had a prime minister who is now General Secretary of NATO, they are still importing large volumes of LNG from Russia. This money goes into the Russian budget and is used for Russia's military machine. So the European Union is, on the one hand, kind of helping Ukraine to survive economically, and on the other hand is giving money to Moscow to feed its military machine. There's also a second related factor here, which is that a number of key countries, particularly Germany, are still, and the EU is all ignoring this, they are exporting lots of goods to countries in Eurasia, like Armenia, like Kazakhstan, like Kyrgyzstan, Georgia. These four countries are transit countries for goods going to Russia. These four countries are helping Russia escape Western sanctions. Armenia's trade with Russia has massively increased since 2022. So why is the EU turning a blind eye to countries like Germany? I mean, German government must know that these goods are not staying in Armenia, Georgia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan. They're going to Russia. Again, many of these goods are dual-use goods, and they are used in the military as well. So I think all of these areas, just one reminder, everybody's probably forgotten, that Trump's first presidency, he imposed sanctions on Nord Stream 2, which incredibly the Germans continued building after 2014. When President Biden took office in 2021, he removed those sanctions. So I'm actually think Trump was doing very good things dealing with Russia. And in the case of Azerbaijan, anything that reduces Russia's energy reliance on Europe, reduces Russia's exports of energy to Europe, is good for a number of countries. It's good for Azerbaijan, it's good for Norway, and it's good, of course, for the United States, because what Trump wants to do is replace Russian LNG with American LNG.
Mr. Pommer, from the perspective of the European Union countries, including Italy, yes, please, I would like you to respond whether Europe is ready to spend more for defense purposes and also when it comes to energy.
I want to ask my colleagues, do you think that this tariff war of tariff threat is most driven by economic factor or political factors? Because officially this is done to protect the American jobs, to make America great again, to support the American industry. On the other side, there are rumors about if Europe does this, if Europe does that, like increasing the GDP percent on defense, like taking care more of the defense machinery in Europe, or like letting the US deal with Russia, etc., or supporting US in the confrontation with China. So if there are political reasons for you that could change this tariff trade war, this tariff threat, or the reasons are purely economical?
Well, if I may try to answer that, Daniel, with Anastasia's permission, we should understand that Trump has a global strategy. Trade is just one aspect of that. He has a strategy about the military. He has a strategy about global energy dominance, which he had in his first term, and I think it's going ahead, and also on climate change and migration, and you name it. In every specific area, he has a global strategy. And his biggest concern is not EU or Russia. His biggest concern is China and Indo-Pacific. Therefore, if you look also at the trade deficit with China, it goes above $350 billion. This is not acceptable from, of course, US point of view. With EU, it's about $230 billion. And these are huge amounts. And he believes that he needs to get it back to the US, either through supply chains relocating back to US, because energy is relatively cheaper there now, or forcing them somehow through the tariffs. But I have to underline that these tariffs will not benefit US consumers, because the price will be high then. Because the US consumers, because of the high tariffs,
Just to add, we saw the similar situation in 2018 when Donald Trump initiated the similar policy. Then he explained the dissatisfaction of some citizens by the COVID-19 pandemic, saying that was the reason why he didn't achieve the desired results.
Yes, but I think it's going to make it more expensive. And then also one direct consequence of Trump's policies, trade policies, will be decoupling further with the EU. Then EU internal cohesion will get stronger perhaps because Trump prefers bilateral deals. And secondly, EU will look for other markets to work with. And then it will be just flashback because then China, ASEAN countries, India.
It is what von der Leyen said. We have.
Yes. So EU will work more and more with the rest of the world to the exclusion of the US. So there is going to be dominance warfare as well between EU and US. Perhaps China will benefit more from that. And countries like Turkey also, my home country, because then EU will be looking at Turkey more favorably because it's next door neighbor, supply chain, manufacturing facilities, and rather than working more and more for the US, so they might prefer to bring Turkey in terms of trade, customs union modernization. For Azerbaijan, trade volume is negligible, about $350 million between US and Azerbaijan. But still in energy products, infrastructure and investment, both European Union and US will be vying with each other.
By the way, just to add what you have just mentioned, a few days ago, European Commission has announced that update of trade agreement with Mexico, relaunch of negotiations with Malaysia, and forthcoming trade talks with India. That means that the EU already started to look for new agreements and new partnering cooperation with the countries, apart from the United States.
Even with the United Kingdom, which is a very close strategic partner for the US, they are looking into diversifying and expanding their trade with Commonwealth, of course, but also Australia, Canada, New Zealand, Japan. They want to have free trade agreements with them, not to depend fully on the United States. So I think Trump's policy is good for the US manufacturers and consumers to a certain extent, but it may backfire. So let's not assume that whatever he imposes will work, because we are in a multipolar world. It's not a world in which US is no longer the sole superpower. There will be huge changes in the Middle East, in the Gulf, in the Pacific, Atlantic, the European Union, Russia, Ukraine, China. But nobody should think that Trump will be able to achieve all these things in favor of the United States, because he's not alone.
Coming back to the political implications, Mr. Kuzu, I would like to continue on what you started. We already know that Donald Trump even expressed the willingness to see 5% GDP to be spent by the member countries of NATO, much higher than 2%, and Germany already expressed its dissatisfaction. So do you think that European countries are ready to pay more for American LNG or the defense strategy Donald Trump thinks will benefit everyone?
Well, Trump already in his first term complained that Europe was still building gas pipelines to Russia and buying Russian energy. At the same time, America was subsidizing European military. So he had a point there. I'm not sure if Russian LNG is cheaper than American LNG or whether it's similar price. But certainly he will have a...
But we shouldn't forget about infrastructure available for transport of the LNG gas from the United States to European market.
It's already coming in. Ukraine received a big amount of American LNG just about a month ago. So American LNG is already arriving. If countries like Germany, which built platforms for receiving LNG after 2022, can receive Russian LNG, then they can receive American LNG. It's the same docking and platform infrastructure. I don't see how the infrastructure is any different for Russian or American LNG. As for military spending, of course, 5% is impossible. Even America only spends like 3.8. So the real figure will be no longer 2%, but 3%. And this will be difficult for, of course, many countries, particularly, but not only European countries. Canada is at the bottom of military spending, and countries like Spain, Italy, spend very little on their military. So there's about 5 countries which are really at the bottom.
Less to 2%.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think
But Germany, of course, is the one that everybody complains about because it's the biggest economy in Europe, and they were supposed to go through this revolution after 2022, and they have not really increased their defense spending. But even the British, under the Conservatives for 15 years in power, defense spending went down. So this was a common European problem, but it's now changing, and Trump is playing a positive role in changing this. Of course, Putin is also playing a role in this as well.
Mr. Pomir, let's take a sample of Italy. We know about close energy cooperation between Italy and Azerbaijan, and still, if there is a need to have a new energy policy, is Italy ready to change its energy partners and start close cooperation with American companies when it comes to energy import or any other issues?
Absolutely, but we have to say that Italy is leaning towards Trump now. Ms. Meloni was the only head of government invited to the presidential inauguration 10 days ago, 1 week ago. She is in the same ideological front as Trump. There is a figure like Elon Musk who is playing a paramount role in connecting the two countries. There are rumors that the Italian government is contracting Elon Musk company SpaceX for the security of government communication. So there are close links. As for changing the energy policy, I think it's a long process. It's a long process. I don't think that Italy will give up, will renounce, will change its traditional policy of being granted gas and oil from Azerbaijan as well as from other Eurasian sources or North African sources like Algeria. Italy has very limited financial resources. It's a problem that struck the country from the 80s. We have a large expenditure on social needs, like the pensions, like the health system, like the public school, the university system, the security. So the public role in Italy is very large and costs a lot. I think that any government has found a balance between commitments and expenditures, and this balance is very volatile. So I don't think that for the foreseeable future, any deep change in energy policy as for Italy is concerned. Politically speaking, yes, Italy will be very close, it's close and will be closer to Donald Trump. But I want to ask a question to my colleagues. I think that Europe in 2 years, 3 years will face a political revolution. Trumpite governments will take the lead in France with Madame Le Pen, Pop, who knows, in Germany with AfD. So the Europe will be soon ideologically aligned to Trump. I do really agree with you when you said Trump is not alone. What do you think will change if Europe goes to right or extreme right or to a hyper-conservative stance, politically speaking, for European Union and for the US-European relations?
Well, so Mr. Oguchu, it seems that European countries, we should expect to have a division. There will not be any
single approach formed in response to Trump's new tariff policy.
I think that's true.
I mean, EU is not a homogeneous bloc. You know, all these 28 countries with different size, different priorities and endowments. You cannot put Germany in the same basket with Malta, Cyprus, or Finland. Therefore, it will be difficult for EU, as it has been so far, to act as a uniform bloc. internally strong vis-a-vis the United States or any other power. Therefore,
Absolutely.
I think Europe will continue to decline in competitiveness, in trade relations with the rest of the world. And I strongly believe that with this rise of authoritarian groups, political groups in Europe, not only in Hungary, Turkey, but now Italy, also perhaps in the future in Germany, Netherlands, and other countries, they will be closer to what Trump is thinking, of course. And I believe that Europe will not have a great chance in the global governance as the US and China. It will be relegated to a regional power status, although economically it's a giant, but politically, as we always say, it's a dwarf in many ways. And I think we have to also bear in mind that this LNG, US LNG versus 6% of GDP in defense spending, they are now interlinked by Trump. I agree with my colleagues that I don't think that 6% can be imposed. It is not possible. I just learned from our colleague that US is spending 3.8 itself. But US LNG, although it's expensive, coming all the way to Europe, now almost 55% of US LNG is coming to Europe, 55%. In Turkey, almost a third of LNG imports coming from the United States. So there's a delicate geopolitical balancing act as well. Pipeline gas coming from Russia and LNG coming from the United States.
But you should understand that not all countries are able to have such many varieties of energy partners at the same time working on green energy transition. It's costly, it needs time, and it needs good diplomatic solution.
Yes, I should also, one last point I want to make here is the EU Green Deal and decarbonization efforts. I believe that with the rise of these conservative right-wing governments in similar approach to Trump, this will be less and less relevant because it is also causing Europe to lose competitiveness with all this, green measures and taxes that you bring together. So fossil fuels, as US is doing, will become probably more prominent than we anticipated a couple of years ago, because still 81% of the world energy is fossil fuels, and EU insisting on green energy and technologies. Of course, this is admirable for our climate change goals, but it is not going to help European economies to get out of the crisis and competitiveness being enhanced. Therefore, this is going to be one of the casualties, green energy process and climate change goals we have.
I guess that was one of the issues for discussion during COP29, which was held in Baku. Countries tried to achieve the consensus. They did, but there is much to be done again in the future.
Yeah, could I just add something about the tariffs?
Yes, please. My next question was to you, actually, about this tariffs policy, the response of the European Union. And actually, do you think that some European manufacturers are ready to move part of their operations to the United States?
No, I don't think that, but I think that the discussion so far has assumed that there's a kind of a major ideological guru sat in Washington, which is Donald Trump. Donald Trump is also a cynic. He's corrupt and he's a cynic. And one example of this cynicism and corruption is that Elon Musk produces a lot of his or all of his, I don't know the figures, electric cars in China. So, let's not assume that there's a kind of pure just ideology behind Trump. There's also a lot of corruption, cynicism, what's in it for me. There's I would say as much corrupt pragmatism as there is ideology. And just the final point about European far right, there is no unity amongst the populist nationalists in Europe. You could see that in the fact that Orban was not invited to Trump's inauguration, which is kind of interesting. And also, most of the populist nationalists in Europe are never likely to get, a landslide election. They're going to always hover at maybe 15, 20, 25%. That's true of all the countries that were mentioned, Netherlands, Germany, and elsewhere. And most of these populist nationalists, including the pro-Brexit in Britain, are anti-Russian. They're anti-Putin. The populist nationalists who are pro-Russian are actually in a minority amongst these. And who takes Orban seriously? Orban, Fico in Slovakia, Le Pen, she's had to moderate her position very much. In the Netherlands, it's impossible to be pro-Russian because Russia shot down a civilian airliner in 2014. Most of the passengers were Dutch. So Germany is probably a test case, but AfD is isolated and nobody will go into a coalition with AfD. So I'm not so worried as maybe some of my colleagues are about this rising populist nationalism. I think it's contained in many ways.
Yeah, I think one thing is that, unfortunately, this is not politically correct to say, but democracy is not functioning properly in these countries. That's the reason that people have a tendency or appetite for more authoritarian regimes, which they believe can do. Look at Trump. I mean, he's saying and doing the right things, but he's the wrong man doing it. I think when you say America first, I think I would like to say Turkey first. You want to say Ukraine first or Italy first, because
President Erdogan, Mr. Erdogan says Turkey first all the time.
Yes, but whether he can do the same as Trump is doing, because he doesn't have the clout and power to do it as effectively as Trump, because he has the tools and instruments at hand.
He was more successful in Syria than Obama, so I wouldn't think.
I have a final suggestion to you. Do you think it's possible, because I'd like to ask a question to my dear and very interesting colleagues, do you think it's possible Europe can continue the war in Ukraine by itself without the US support?
Europe will not be able to address this problem alone, because I organized a meeting here in London. Boris Johnson, when he was prime minister, he came with the Ukrainians about the reconstruction. And when there was pressure on him to send more arms and more aid to Ukraine, he said, well,
even
you have to
troops, even ground troops.
Yes, and he said, you have to go and talk to Biden. We can't do much about it. Although this is a country which is the most advocate, a very vocal advocate, and working hard to help Ukraine. They pointed to White House. Go and talk to Biden. Only Biden can take such decision. Then we follow, he said. So therefore, I don't think that Europe alone can deal with Russia-Ukraine conflict or bring any settlement there.
Indeed, that's very interesting discussion. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining Headlines today. I'm more than sure that we will come back to this issue again in near future. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you to you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you, dear viewers, for watching Headlines. Stay with AnewZ and see you in the next edition.